I'd like to call tonight's meeting of the Board of Commissioners of Lower Macungie to order. If we could all please stand for a pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, in terms of the roll call, everyone is here except for our solicitor, who is supposed to be joining through Zoom, so hopefully he will make it. There are no agenda modifications this evening. There are no announcements and presentations. Under hearings and approval, 6.1, Resolution 2024-35, naming of the new Sauerkraut Lane Extension, renaming of a portion of Quarry Road, naming of Pork Lane is being tabled this evening to a further date. Item number 7, public comment on non-agenda topics. Anybody has anything to, please come up to the podium, sign in, and state your name and address for the record.
Okay. My name is Ken Martin, and I live at 6542 Scenic View Drive in the Stonehill Meadows development. We moved into our house in October 2020, but we have been residents and taxpayers in Lower Macungie Township for the last 40 years. I'm here today to express my disappointment and dissatisfaction with the lack of progress on completing the numerous open items in our development. These include such items as biking, walking trails that were never completed and those that were ripped up and never repaired, unfinished overflow and holding basins, sidewalks in common areas that need to be repaired, replacement of dead or dying trees in common areas, new trees that were never installed per the development plans, grass along sidewalks in common areas that was never planted, just weeds and stones, and removal of mounds of excess topsoil, etc. The developer has not made any effort to address any of these issues for almost a year, and some of them have not been addressed for several years. I've tried to get info on the status of these concerns several times by calling Nathan Jones, but unfortunately, his voicemail is either full or the phone is not answered. I also called Vince, deputy director, a few weeks ago and left a message, but never got a response. One of the reasons we decided, my wife and I, to build a new house at Stonehill Meadows was based on an article in the Morning Call in 2008, quoting Sarah Pandel, the township planning director at that time, saying that Stonehill Meadows would be a model for all future residential developments in the future because of open space concept and provisions for walking, biking trails for township residents. Particular trails in our development were set up to connect basically Macungie and Albertus, so that residents in Macungie, Albertus, ourselves could get from one area in the township to another. And I know that's an important thing for the township with developments, being able to have walking and biking trails to get from development to development. We don't have them. And so, we have areas that are just stone. It's been ripped up, macadam's been ripped up and nothing has been done. So I think that, it's important for the township to do something about this. And so I'm asking the leadership of Lower Macungie Township, what are you going to do to get these open items completed per the plans of the development that were agreed upon when the development was approved over 6 years ago? So that's my statement.
Thank you very much. Bruce.
I think we have some other people.
I'm sure you do. Just one second. Just in terms of, well, let me just say this first. If we're getting calls to staff that aren't being returned, that's a concern.
That is a concern, and I apologize for that. That should be returned.
Yeah, now the one thing I will tell you is Nathan Jones is no longer employed here. His last day was Tuesday. So if you do call him, you will not get him. We're looking for a new planner. It's kind of abrupt, he left with very short notice. But if you're not getting calls back, that's a concern, and we'll address that. Sure.
Hi,
Ma'am.
my name is Melissa Bosak. I live at 6446 Scenic View Drive in the Stonehill Meadows neighborhood. I've lived in the neighborhood for almost 3 years. We moved in September of 2021. Our home backs up to the trail and borders the borough and the unfinished emergency access road. The last homes in our neighborhood were completed a year ago. We have been dealing with the unfinished trail the entire time we've lived in our home. The developer has made the neighborhood worse by destroying part of the trail that was finished, and now that part of the trail is unsafe and unusable. There has been orange construction fence at the entrance where the trail meets the sidewalk for over a year and a half. This creates an unsafe condition and is also very unsightly. People trespass in our yard due to the trail being incomplete, but we can't put up a fence due to the trail and access road not being completed. There is a large pile of dirt that has been abandoned behind homes and kids climb on it, which is unsafe as well as unsightly. We have flooding behind our house due to the swale not being corrected, and the construction net remains in the drain, causing the backup to be worse. Neighbors have tried to sell their homes, but can't get a reasonable price due to the poor condition in our neighborhood. We also have dirt bikes that drive from the township to the borough, and we have cars that drive on the access road, which is not safe and is not allowed. It is not a road, but it is not blocked off, so people drive on it. We have numerous children who play in our cul-de-sac. It is a safety risk to have all of these problems going on. We ask that the township work with the developer to address these safety and functionality issues promptly, as it is affecting our quality of life. I want my 3-year-old to be able to safely play in his backyard and grow up in a neighborhood that he can be proud to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. I can, but I know. Yeah.
Good evening. My
Good
name
evening.
is Deb Augusta and I live at 3725 Swabia Court, also in Stonehill Meadows. We were the first people to move in, so we have seen this from day one. I just have a very simple question. It's been my understanding from the beginning that the developer had given money to the township to hold an escrow as a kind of a promise that we will do what we say we're going to do, and if not, you have their escrow money. So my question is, why isn't it being used to just finish it? And maybe I was misled by the developers in that understanding. And if that is correct, is there a time frame on that? Because if they're trying to tie you up in litigation,
Mhm.
then are they going to get their money back because there's a time frame on how long you can hold that escrow? My question.
So I'll answer that question pretty simply. Yes, we do have an escrow on the property, and we will have that escrow until everything is completed or until we have to complete it ourselves. There is a legal process that we have to go through, and believe me, we're fighting with the developer to get this done ourselves. But we were just talking about another development where we still have money in escrow that's been there for 25 years because they haven't finished everything they're supposed to. So they're not going to get a dime of their money back until everything is completed to everyone's satisfaction.
25 years, that's a little alarming.
Well, not to the extent of what the problems you're having. We're talking little things, but they're a much bigger issue.
Hi, everyone. Multitask. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Park. I am also a resident of Stonehill Meadows. I've lived there since February of 2022. I'm also the HOA president. And I'll be quite frank with you, I am stepping down a year early in my term because of the headaches that this has created and the emails that I constantly get from residents. And we have a developer who's no longer responding to us. So I am an attorney by trade. I am not an attorney in this space at all. But we have been challenged by our developer and we have outsourced our work
to a local law firm. We've had to sue our developer for unlawful conversion of our HOA funds to pay for common area taxes. The developer now refuses to speak to us. They've also alleged that they have filed a lawsuit against the borough of Macungie. I've found nothing on the Lehigh County docket, but this may be true because apparently the borough is trying to leverage their escrow funds to create possibly a right-of-way that was never planned at the end of the Scenic View cul-de-sac. I'm simply here again as the HOA president to reiterate my neighbor's concerns. It is a safety hazard in our neighborhood. Until we paid out of HOA funds to have Oasis come and clean up a common area in the borough section, there were spikes sticking out of the common area where kids can easily run around. Spikes were sticking out, hidden by high grass, created a real hazard. And if somebody got hurt there, it would be the HOA who would be stuck with the bill, and we would just have to try to seek indemnification from a a developer who's no longer speaking to us. And so I reiterate the concerns of all my neighbors. We have a developer who will not speak to us, and we need to see these things finished. I know at least 2 neighbors on Scenic View who have been looking to sell their homes, and they're, like Melissa said, they're having challenges selling their homes because there are unfinished retention ponds and mounds of dirt and unfinished trails behind their homes. So it's decreasing our property value. It's making our kids unsafe. And we were promised, I mean, the last house was finished over a year ago at this point. Like this, we need to get some answers, and we're really hoping that you guys can help us get them.
Thank you.
Thanks. Everyone can hear me. 6578 Scenic View. Yep.
Bruce, you want to address the concerns, at least from the township's perspective?
We can try and you know, I want to make sure that we're able to get good contact information for the residents here, especially Ashley for you with the HOA, as we continue to have internal discussions about the various items that the residents are speaking of, including trail and pathway, stormwater management, some other items that we continue to identify there. We are working to have that approach on what we're going to take with the developer and the time frame and legally what we're able to do and how we can proceed with the potential question about escrow and using that escrow. At this point, we're not in litigation as others may be, but you know, I would advise the board and the residents not that we want to make substantial comment, but there's always the potential that that is the possibility for the situation and how we're working as a township to make sure we try and avoid that. But we are aware of the concerns. We continue both engineering and Attorney Fisher is also on the call this evening, you know, to try to have some push and resolution. I think if we can work together, that's going to be helpful for both of us to move forward and try to interact with the developer. So I appreciate the comments and feedback. I apologize that some haven't heard from staff. That's not the way we like to run our business operation. I want to make sure that we can have a conversation and you know, exchange ideas and where we're going. So,
Mark, just a quick question, just for clarification. In a situation like this where, you know, there's a potential that the developer has abandoned their responsibilities, is there a time frame to where we can just go in and say, we're going to finish it, we're going to use your money to do so, or does that have to go through the legal route first?
It's just governed by the development agreement, whatever the development agreement provides as far as notice. So I'd have to go back and look at this agreement to see what the notice provision was, but it wouldn't be something outrageous. It would be up to the township to decide once the notice provision expires, if you want to go in and do it and hit their security for it.
Okay, can you get us, or at least review it before our next meeting so that we can have at least some sort of an idea of where we're going? I mean, this wasn't on the agenda, so I don't expect you to know it off the top of your head, but if we can get a response before our meeting on the 16th, right? 16th?
15th.
15th? at least we can have a better understanding of how we can proceed.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I would note, we have made some attempts recently and have not received responses for some of the items that we've identified to the developer. So as recently as, 3 to 4 weeks ago.
So we will have some sort of an idea in the next 15 days or 14 days where we can go with this or how we can proceed. The treatment you're getting from the developer is, disgusting from day one. And I would be outraged as you are if it was the development I lived in. I know what it was purported to be when it was built. I was a little skeptical at the time, just because of reputation. Unfortunately, we're in the situation we're in. Nothing should be unsafe and nothing should be uninhabitable. And you should get your property value the way it should be. So we'll work on getting you an answer and see how we can proceed from there. But we'll do everything in our power. The borough side is harder to deal with. We don't have any jurisdiction there, and I don't even know what's going on the borough side. So, I would say your outrage here, I would direct it there as well and find out, you're not tax-paying members of the borough of Macungie, but you are definitely a concerned party to something that is before them. So I would do that as well, as we work to get you an answer on how we can proceed.
And not to speak for the borough by all means, as we are not the borough, but the township has been in contact with them fairly regularly about the conditions and situation there. So they are aware and definitely share our, kind of concerns with where things are.
Yes, sir. Just, you have to come back up to the microphone, please. It's just because we record the meetings and we want to make sure everybody can hear it.
Say who I am again.
No, that's okay.
The question I have is, I think Ashley might have said something to it regarding this, what we believe, and we don't know for sure, is a disagreement between the township and the borough when it comes to the cul-de-sac at the end of Scenic View Drive. On all the plans, it shows as a cul-de-sac, and that's the way it was designed. Now, there was, I believe, and again, I don't know for sure, some discussion as being that had to be an emergency exit for getting fire trucks or whatever into that area. And that's why it was left the way it is. It's very haphazard. There's just stones thrown there. I know Macungie was upset with the developer at one time. The water was flowing down the mountain into the Macungie streets and even down to Oregon, down to the Allen Oregon facility. So if that could be something that you also look at or find out, what, as a resident of that cul-de-sac, I want it to remain a cul-de-sac. Because if it's not, people are going to be flying through there over to Macungie. We've already had, you see people come in, flying in, oh, can't get through, walk, go back out again. You open that up, that's a nightmare for us anyway.
Bruce, you can correct me wrong. I don't think that we're having any disagreement with the borough on anything.
So, and you're talking in the cul-de-sac at the end of Scenic View, correct? Just so I have the right one.
Scenic View Drive.
At the end of Scenic View.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and pardon my ignorance because I wasn't here before the plan was approved, but there is on the plan set in the recorded plan an emergency egress that is supposed to go to Willow Street in the borough. That is was supposed to be blocked with only fire department access.
Right.
Part of the area in the review that we've looked at is is it necessary that the emergency drive entrance remains? And then we would need to look and see if that's a plan modification for the development. I know Engineer McAdam has been looking at both the stormwater with the borough and the pathway and the emergency access all kind of converge there at one point. And truly looking at that need for that emergency access.
Right.
However, it's supposed to be blocked. It's not a throughway to meet those minimum requirements. To install that with things that they have remaining with that pathway and stormwater. Brian has confirmed that it still would be passable for emergency apparatus. But I appreciate the feedback that the residents potentially might not want that emergency egress there. And if if we can have the applicant come back as or get them to modify the plan to remove that, it sounds like there's support from the public to have the board consider that. So,
And I think the bottom line is it was not intended to be a throughway. It's not going to be a throughway.
Okay.
Now, there may still be an emergency access point, but it would be a gated access point. It wouldn't be just open to the public.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. If we decide to not have emergency access, getting the applicant to come back in and modify the plan is going to be difficult since he doesn't seem to be returning any of our phone calls, yours or ours. So it may just be as the plan says when completed, but it will not be a throughway. It was
Okay.
never intended to be, and it's not going to be a change in that way at all.
Yeah, I mean, there is another entrance from Makunji into our development.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So whether you really need that additional entry point or not, I guess is the point.
Yes, a lot of it has, and forgive me because I'm not an engineer, but a lot of it has to do with turn radiuses and emergency vehicles and things of that nature. Even if there is another entrance, is the turn radius appropriate for a large fire truck to come in from one entrance and get to another part? I don't know. I can't answer that. It was designed the way it was for a reason.
They already had fire trucks in there
Okay.
to do testing.
Good.
I
Well,
don't
then
know.
that answers that question.
correct.
Yeah.
And the subdivision and land development ordinance requires, on cul-de-sac lengths,
Right.
appropriate, emergency access.
So
Regulated by the land
Okay.
development.
to
ordinance.
put your fear aside, it's not going to be a throughway.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, any other comment on non-agenda topics? Okay, moving forward. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Communication, I see none this evening. Appointments to various boards, committees, and commissions, there are none. Item 10, approval of minutes from a previous meeting, July 18th, 2024. Oh, to be considered on the 5th. So we're not doing that tonight. Item 11, approval of transfers, bill list, and payroll. Mr. Bido.
Thank you. We have the following for your consideration this evening. The general fund, $294,235.58. The solid waste fund, $258,350.35. The sewer fund, $35,172. The capital projects fund, $26,923.21. The payroll, $183,077.62. The developer escrow, $11,262.67. For a total of all funds, $809,021.43.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes or approve the transfers, bill list, and payroll. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Any public comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, departmental matters. Engineering, Mr. McAdam. You're on mute, Brian.
Not on mute during the pledge.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Anyway, thank you, President Higgins. The only thing I have is, I'm gonna jump to, the security release for the Wawa, in Nate's absence, and I had talked to Bruce. I don't see any reason these couldn't be lumped into, my item, column for the meetings, but, at any rate, we have a escrow release for the Wawa drive-through. It's the first release that they've requested, and it's in the amount of $788,834.51. I can report that most of the items that were in the escrow are complete. There's only a couple little things left. They are closing in on the project being finished.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the release of a portion of the security release for Wawa drive-through. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Any public comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else, Mr. McAdam?
One super quick thing, in light of the residents' concerns about Stone Hill, I just shot an email to the borough engineer to ask for status update. So I will coordinate with Bruce and Mark regarding that feedback and, assist in getting a report to you guys for the next meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for the engineer? Okay. Well, we just did the planning report too, so we'll move on to solicitor. Solicitor Fisher, anything for the board?
Nothing to report unless there are any questions.
Any questions for the solicitor? Okay, moving on, Township Manager, Mr. Beidle.
Thank you, gentlemen, and the public. I apologize. I didn't put on the agenda a follow-up to our discussion at the workshop in July to talk about the potential for open space debt financing. Where we are to get to the point where we have the appropriate funding source to start to execute on several properties that the townships potentially identified to acquire as part of our open space initiative. It's necessary that we look to finance debt in the area of 10 million upwards to $20 million. So what we have this evening, we work with PFM. They are a financial company to look at those various entities or things that we can execute, such as floating bonds or engaging banks for bank loans. And with that, they actually, as I reported at the workshop, they were working on a two-pronged approach. The first, putting out requests for proposals to various banks and funding institutions, financial institutions, to look at a first lend of $10 million or sub $10 million. The other component to the side of this was also to gauge the interest of and current rates of the bond market. And fortunately, Scott Shearer from PFM is with us this evening. Scott's here to kind of just review where we are, talk about the process. If we want to move forward, and as a staff, we're recommending to meet various timelines. We'll have to be aggressive and have a consideration of the board at the 15th to potentially draft an ordinance, which would then be considered, can be further discussed at the workshop in August, and then be considered at the first meeting in September, so that we can close on financing by the end of the year. So Scott's here. I don't want to steal the thunder. He is definitely great and has a lot of background information for the board. So Scott, if you want to grab a chair there. Give the newest one. I have the one from before. This morning we talked about. All right, let me I give that to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening. Your manager did a great job at summarizing everything. Before maybe we get into the details of the handout, again, I think it was all summarized great. It was early July that we sent out an RFP to a handful of bond underwriters that do a lot of work here in Pennsylvania for local governments, especially townships. And we sent it out to probably about 24 or so different banks, different financial institutions in the Lehigh Valley and even outside of Lehigh Valley as well, that we do a lot of transactions with. So we kind of had the market pretty well canvassed. We got the results of the RFP back a few days ago. And so we wanted to kind of summarize here this evening and make our recommendation. We got good interest from both the bond underwriters as well as the bank loans. Our company, we have no vested interest in whichever path you move forward with. Our goal is just to put forth and kind of recommend the most economical and financially advantageous path to go forward if you wanted to do this borrowing. So again, we've been working with the administration on lots of different options, different planning modules on borrowing, whether 15, 20 million or so over the next 2 years. It's multi-step plan to meet the needs of the township. So with that, I will just dive into, I won't go through all these pages in detail, but just hit on a couple of the pages. So starting on page 2, we have lots of different interest rate charts, but in the middle of page 2, this is a municipal index that goes back to the early 1990s. So it kind of hits on a lot of the ups and downs in the economy over the years. And it, you know, if you go to the left side, that's where it was back in the early 1990s, and over on the right side, more current. And what I like to look at is sort of the different information within that graph, where you see the blue, for that blue line where it says current. The current rate for this index is a 2.76%, and 60% of the time rates are greater than where they are right now. So we're not at the all-time lows that we saw, you know, back say in 2020 or so, but overall we're still below historical averages. Now, this is not the rate that the township would borrow at. This is just that index. So this is a 10-year municipal index. You're going to be borrowing, you know, municipal bonds, which would be tax exempt. So depending on the issuer's credit rating and your credit rating, in this case, there would be some differential between that index and where your bonds are ultimately priced. So we'll get a little bit more into that with the results of the RFP. But overall, as far as the timing of looking to do some borrowing, you know, again, we are at pretty good times. All indications right now is that the Federal Reserve will more than likely be lowering short-term interest rates here, potentially at their September meeting. Now, what the Fed does, you know, they just had their meeting this week and left things unchanged. What the Fed does, they control the short-term interest rates. You're going to be borrowing on a long-term basis. We're looking at, say, a 25-year amortization. However, what the Fed does on the short-term rates will have an impact, just not as much, on the longer-term rates, which is kind of more what we care about for your borrowing purposes. So we're in a good environment, and I think we might be heading into potentially even a slightly better environment as well. Page 3, kind of lots of words on here, but a lot of it we already said, and the manager already went through. So we're looking at, you know, the capital plan for open space financings, 15, 20, 25 million. It kind of depends on how everything comes in. The debt would be backed by the taxing power of the township. However, the dedicated revenue source of the EIT through the referendum would be basically pledged towards this debt. But to get the best overall interest rate, it's going to have the taxing power of the township behind it. As Bruce mentioned, we're doing this dual track approach where we're looking at both bond issues and bank loans. The transactions that we've done for the township to date, the 2 most recent they were both bank loans. Because of the size of the transactions and more importantly, the maturity, both those were relatively short. That makes a lot of sense for a bank loan. Here, we're talking about a larger amount and a much longer amortization to keep the payments a little bit more affordable. So in point number 3 here, we got 9 bank loan proposals back. We got 5 bond underwriting proposals back. And after kind of doing the apples to apples comparison to all the different proposals that were received, our recommendation would be to move forward with a bond issue. And that bond issue, the firm that submitted the best proposal was Janney Montgomery Scott, who does a lot of business here in Pennsylvania, do a lot of different bond issue transactions with them. And we'll get again into more of the specifics. As far as some of the bond issue facts, just because it's been, I think, a long time since the township has done a bond issue. So we would assist throughout the whole process, coordinating basically, if you own any kind of stocks or mutual funds, basically a prospectus has to be done of the township. It has all sorts of economic and geographic data of the township that we'll put together with obviously the assistance of the administration. We'll also lead the credit rating process. So the township right now does not have a credit rating because you don't have any public debt outstanding. We expect this rating to come out relatively high, which is good. The higher the credit rating, the better the interest rates will ultimately be. We had the underwriters assume a certain credit rating through the RFP. We think that was a good rating, but you know, obviously we're going to work hard to maybe even try to get that up a notch or so. So we keep track. My office in Harrisburg keeps track of every transaction done in Pennsylvania. So we know all the interest rates done on every deal, every township deal, no matter if it was long or short, good credit rating, not so good credit rating. And then we also have our pricing desk in Charlotte that also looks at every deal across the country. So when it comes time to finally pricing the bonds, which we'll get on the calendar, we have a lot of horsepower in our offices to make sure that the underwriter performs the way they're supposed to. Not only, according to the bid that came through, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but also, if we're not going to be pricing the deal for locking in the rates for another month or so, we just want to make sure that nothing crazy happens in the market, and that the bid holds true. We do have the national election coming up that, could shake the market up a little bit, which is one of the reasons why we want to stay clear of a November pricing and even an October pricing. We'd like to kind of get this done in September before maybe more volatility would occur in the markets. The bond issue will have a fixed rate for the entire duration of the amortization. And again, from an affordability standpoint, we're running this at a 25-year amortization. So from day one to the end of year 25, that interest rate will be locked in. The only way it could change is if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, wherever it may be, you pass another ordinance to refinance that debt. And really probably the only reason you want to change the rate is if we could get a lower rate. And so these bonds would be sold with a 5-year call feature, which is basically the shortest prepayment feature that you can embed in this bond issue. We want to give you the most flexibility so that if rates do drop, say 5 years from now, you are able to refinance these to achieve some savings. When we compare bank loans with bond issues, traditionally, bond issues do have a lower interest rate. Sometimes they have higher upfront costs, and that's all baked into our analysis, but they do typically have lower interest rates. And the big difference between a bond issue and a bank loan is, in many instances, not always, and you'll see here, that a lot of banks cannot commit to a fixed rate for the full term when you're talking, say, 25 years. We did get a few, which were great, but the bond issue rates were just a little bit lower than the bank loan. Again, there's no future interest rate risk. So after you issue the bonds and, the price is locked in, you could care less really what the rates do out there in the market. They're locked in, again, through maturity, unless you decide to refinance. And we talked about the call feature. The other thing with a bond issue, now this is not overly burdensome. We'll obviously assist the administration with this on an annual basis, but there will be some continuing disclosure information that the investors will want to see on an annual basis. The township's financials will need to be uploaded, say the audit and the budget, and maybe some updates to the top 10 largest taxpayers and some things like that on an annual basis, just so investors that buy these bonds have more up-to-date information about how the township is doing. So that's one other slight difference between a bond issue and the bank. Talk already in point number 5 about the two-step plan. The other thing that if you do decide to move forward in point number 6 on page 3, that there will ultimately be the ordinance that will be up for authorization, say in the next meeting or so, and then the adoption of the ordinance to borrow. But because you may need to potentially spend some of the township's funds to maybe purchase some of this open space before some of these transactions close, there'll be a reimbursement resolution. It's basically just the more belts and suspenders. There's no cost to do this reimbursement resolution, no advertising, but basically just allows you that if you do have to fund an acquisition of some property before, say, this transaction or the next transaction closes, when the bond issue does close, you can reimburse yourself for that money. And it's just IRS related stuff that to have that reimbursement resolution is just good to have that, so no questions are asked. We'll have bond counsel prepare that, and that'll be part of discussions for later meetings, but you'll hear maybe more about that in future meetings. Again, no cost to do that, no advertising. It's just more for the file that if it ever asked, yes, you have that. Page 4, we can skip. That's just your current debt that we have assisted township with issuing here over the past couple of years. Then we get into some really small numbers in the next couple of pages. But basically, the long and short of page 5, this is a summary of the bond underwriting proposals that we received. So again, 5 different responses: Janney Montgomery Scott, RBC Capital Markets, Stifel Nicholas, PNC, and Raymond James. All good firms, do a lot of transactions here in Pennsylvania. We asked for various criteria, both quantitative and qualitative. At the end of the day, when you compare the fees, when you compare the interest rates based off benchmark, our recommendation would be to go forward with the Janney Montgomery Scott proposal based on all their different facts. All of them, again, were good proposals, all pretty close, but at the end of the day, the one that had the lowest cost, and that's in called box 31. See, those are ones highlighted in yellow, box 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. So the 4.01% was what it was the day submitted the bid here a couple days ago for this 25-year transaction. So the way that works is if you decide, if you pass the ordinance to move forward with this bond issue, that as you know, the interest rates change on a daily basis, and this municipal index will change on a daily basis as well. So basically, the way we hold the underwriters' feet to the fire in this case is if the spread, so they submitted spreads off this index. So if we go to price this transaction, let's just say right after your September 5th meeting, if you approve the ordinance, we'll look at then what that index is on, say, September 6th, and then we'll use these spreads, 20 basis points, 60 basis points, 80 basis points off that spread to then hold their feet to the fire. And, honestly, if we see that the market is even stronger than what their spreads are, that's where we're going to push them even more to get a lower interest rate, obviously a lower cost for the township. So the 4.01 true interest cost, compares to the 4.11, 4.12, 4.13, and 4.42. Again, overall, all good firms, all good proposals, but the Janney Montgomery Scott provide the lowest cost to the township. Then on page 6 is a very brief summary of the various bank loan proposals that we received. We did actually kind of surprisingly get 3 proposals from different banks. Webster Bank, which does more business outside of Pennsylvania, but they do tend to make some lending to local governments. Nutropoli Bank, which I think you're familiar with that name, they were very aggressive as well, with a fixed rate for the full term of a 4.88, and then Capital One Bank with a fixed rate for the full term of a 4.92. The other lending institutions below there in the yellow box, they had, maybe we'll give you a fixed rate for 5 years or 10 years, and then it'll reset the variable rate after that or reset to some other index. And so we did different comparisons to them. By law in Pennsylvania, there has to be a cap rate on any debt that is not fixed for the full term. So we did different averages, assuming the cap rate that they put in the proposal and the average rate of the index that they're resetting to. Again, long story short, when you compare the bond issue to the fixed rate bank loans, as well as the variable rate bank loans that change, our recommendation is still to proceed with the fixed rate bond issue. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the difference, if you go to page 7, this compares the proposal from Nutropoli Bank, which again is a good bank. We've done quite a few loans with them. Good proposal, good bank, and based on the interest rate that they proposed, you see in column 5 for basically a $10 million transaction that results in about $16.8 million payback. With the bond issue in the blue, and you go down in column 7, basically with the same amortization but a lower interest rate, about a $15.4 million payback. So pretty substantial, about $1.4 million difference in total interest savings by going with this lower proposal. And then finally, on the last page, page 8, just gives you the brief timeline of what we've been doing here in the past couple weeks, as well as then going forward. So starting at the top, July 8th is when we sent out the RFP, sent some information over to the administration to start working on. I think you were updated at your July 22nd workshop. We got the bank loan proposals due the week earlier this week. This evening, just talking about the results. The week of August 12th, we'll do kind of have various conversations and communication with the credit rating agency and the bond insurance company. And then August 15th, because our recommendation is to go with the bond issue, that would be on the far right-hand side of the August 15th line. That would be where you consider authorizing the bond parameters ordinance. At that meeting, your bond counsel will actually be here. I will not be able to be here. I'll be out of town, but bond counsel will be here and to answer any questions specifically related to the ordinance itself. And then we'll do more credit rating stuff. And then September 5th, I'll be back for the enactment, or at least the consideration of the bond parameters ordinance again at your September 5th meeting. And then probably that week after is when we would lock in those rates on the bond issue and then close about a month later in mid-October. I think that should then meet the needs of the township, as we know it today, I think as you all know it today, to have some funds in hand for some potential acquisitions. And then we'll deal with the second financing next year, at a later time. We'll be back for that. So I know that was a lot of information, but to boil down, financing, basically $10 million now. Canvass the market through the RFP process, bond issue with Janney Montgomery Scott seems to make the most financial sense to move forward with. And, the rest of the team start getting the documents prepared, working with your administration, and you could potentially consider and authorize for the ordinance at your meeting on August 15th. Great. Bruce, anything you'd like to add?
No, well, actually, just one thing and one concept I want to make sure the board is continuing to be aware of. And we did speak about this at the workshop. And as we incur debt or we take on new debt, just a reminder that this, there is a total debt limit that the township can take. We are not close to that at this point because we have no bond issuances that have occurred. We do have some limited financing, but just so the board's aware, even though that this is dedicated open space earned income tax funding that's going to this overall debt picture, we need to watch, as we put $10 to $20 million worth of incurred debt that goes towards our, potential to ever issue additional debt, as we hit our debt ceiling for where we are as a municipality. So long term, we just need to be mindful if in year 15 or 20, we're looking to make improvements like, facilities or things of that nature that may be of a high value cost where we have to issue some additional line of credit, or in this case, the bond side, that is something we need to be mindful of.
And that's a good reminder. And that calculation will need to be done. It'll be part of the prospectus, the offering document that investors will see. And it's also, maybe even more importantly, part of the documentation that needs to be sent to the state for their approval of the transaction. So that legally, we need to make sure you're within that capacity. And then even with your within that capacity, which you will be, to Bruce's point, you still will have room, but that's something that we'll talk more about at the future meetings as well. In theory, your borrowing capacity should grow over time because your debt will be paying down on an annual basis. And in theory, your budget probably will be increasing. Those are basically the two variables that's part of the calculation. How much debt do you have outstanding? And what's the size of basically how much revenues are you producing for all your different funds? And so debt should go down as you're paying it down, both your two existing loans you already have. And then if you move forward with this transaction, once we issue it, starting the next year, you'll start paying that debt down. And that's a calculation that we'll keep up to date for you. But it's definitely part of the long-term planning that we've been doing.
Commissioner Robert.
Well, along those lines, it seems to me that with the borrowing we're talking about, we're going to be pretty much committed as far as 3/4 of the funds for the open space for a good many years to come. And so this would be, in a way, capping the amount of open space that we could acquire. Unless we go out and increase the
Earned income tax.
earned income tax for open space. And what is the process that we would have to go through that? Have another referendum? And
Actually,
We would have to check with legal. I don't
Yeah.
know what the parameters are to increase.
I had asked that question once about the library, and what I was told is to lower it, we have to go out and do a referendum. To raise it, you don't, because it's
Well-
already been voted in.
okay, but that's real estate tax and this is earned
No,
income. tax.
No, they're both earned income taxes. The one for the library is
That's a
No.
property tax.
No, it's property tax.
Property tax, yeah.
Wow.
0.25 mils of property tax.
that sounds stupid. Never mind.
Yeah,
So they are different, and before we move any further, I would like to understand what flexibility we have associated with after loading up on the debt at this point.
Yeah, and so I would note too, just when we had started this process and Scott and his team, when we kind of did a projection, we were mindful of the current rate earned income tax collection, also mindful of the board's willingness to support maintenance and improvements of open space funding to that 25% level. And that is one of the reasons why we chose a longer term to hit the annual debt service that will allow for 3/4 of the total collection amount. So we collect just over $2 million. We've been basing all of this debt repayment on that. And, Commissioner Robert, you make a valid point, and it's something that, we need to make sure, or the board's comfortable, or we as a staff make sure that you have all the information where that is correct. When we take this lend, if we do this lend plus our borrow, if we do this borrow and execute the additional borrow, you are now at the limit for where that tax rate is, unless you start to look at not dedicating that 25% of the funds. However, I will say, if we could run some projections, and I think I did some quick calculations where, as Scott said, over a period of 20 years, there's an expectation that our earned income tax receipts should be growing at a number, that we could potentially even figure on a worst case scenario, 0.5% to 2% that we see that growth. That also now you're collecting more revenue, and your percent of debt that you're repaying now leaves you some additional dollars. So if you trend that over 25 years, I'm sure we probably could run a calc. You could
Oh, yeah.
see that type of information.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
And I understand what Maury's saying, and it makes a lot of sense. I think the other part of this is open space is a finite resource right now. It's not like all of a sudden there's going to be new open space in 10 years that you're looking at. So if it's there, I don't know that I would anticipate that number needing to go much higher in the future, because we know what's open right now. We know what's on the official map, and it's not like they're going to create new ones. That
Correct.
wrong?
Correct. And that's the hard decision of, properties that have notified us of their intention to develop, and putting us on the 1 year time clock for a potential acquisition under the municipal planning code that allows for those acquisitions. After that, various targets that we've had on our list include properties there. After that, I don't know how much more open space that we might have. And I think that puts the board in a difficult situation, because now knowing the financial picture and the amounts that you can borrow, really prioritizing the land and what we're going to pay to acquire certain open space makes those decisions even more important. So
But also, as we go through this process, the price of the land keeps going up. And so, and as it stands now, the appraised value of all the land we would like to acquire is substantially higher than the value that we would be able to take in taxes. So that would argue for the other side that
Well, it would limit our options in what we could.
in the near term.
Right.
And then conditions might change, and so that would free up opportunities for some of the other lands at some future point.
You'd also hope that this tax increases without ever having to increase it, because it's an earned income tax. So if people are doing better, the tax does go up without ever having to raise it.
And that's the analysis that we'll work together on.
yeah.
Deals.
And I think, we see normally on a regular collection, I think we're around 2.5% recently. So 2.5% over 20-year period is
That'll make a big.
it's a significant change. If those with earning potential continue living in the township, we continue to be a destination place that they want to be to drive that revenue.
Not that I like to talk about 5-year plans or 10-year.
No, you're not. You don't do that at all.
But, yeah, would like to look a little further ahead than yesterday.
I agree. Judging by early in the meeting, there may be a lot more houses for sale, so, we may, get more people coming. Any other questions? Yes.
Got a
Mr.
big question.
Wait.
It appears the bonds come in like 0.75% less than bank.
About, yeah.
Fixed rate. If they both would have came in the same, would there have been a better choice to go with? If they were both flat?
If they were both the same, I would recommend going with the bank loan. Yeah. Yeah, just because there's a little less administrative work ongoing with the bank loan. Yeah.
With that being said, your answer, is it ever the case you go back to see if bank would be a better choice, like you just said, would match the bond?
So typically, when the proposals come in, that is their best and final offer. If it was a much closer spread, like if we're talking maybe 5 basis points or so, but here we're talking about 75 basis point difference, I think it's next to no chance for the banks to come down that much because it is such a wide difference. But yeah, we'd maybe be having a different discussion if the delta was a lot tighter between the bank loans and the bonds.
Just wondered, it makes you wonder if they would match.
Yeah, I mean, they do put their best foot forward just because of the competitive process that they're used to going through in these kind of proposals. And again, sometimes the client does ask, well, since they're so close, can you see if they'll sharpen by a basis point or two? But here we're talking substantially more than that. And just talking to the banks that did submit some proposals, I do feel confident that these were their best and final.
So historically, they don't come back on this much.
They don't come down that far, right?
Scott, can I just ask for clarification too? Is that something that's due to length of term as well as what we're looking at for that repayment? So if the board would say we don't want to engage, keeping a component of the earned income tax for improvements or maintenance, and we want to spend the entire, $2 million to pay back debt in a shorter time frame, would that impact how a bank would look at that, or are the rates on that short-term financing just what they are at that point?
It's pretty much what they are at that point.
Hey, the term no drawdown.
So for a bank loan, there's kind of 2 choices. You could either have a drawdown facility, which means that, say, maybe we're the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, that the bank would basically hold the money and you would just take the money down when you need it and only pay the interest expense on the money when you draw it down. So say you have a $10 million facility, but you only draw down 5 million, you're only paying interest expense on 5 million, but you're also not earning any investments on the other 5 million. That they basically keep that money. Some banks are okay with that drawdown facility. Others say, no, you have to take it all on day one. And so here, the good news, we're in a pretty good environment right now where, let's just say you borrow the funds at around 4%, you're able to invest the funds at that same amount or even a little bit higher. Now, there's some arbitrage issues, which means you can't earn too much money on this, and you might have to rebate some back to the IRS, which will be kept track of and everything. But here, getting all the money up front does make actually more sense. And some banks, just from a regulatory perspective, they don't allow for drawdown. So it's just an option that we put out there, and if they are able to do it, we like to present it to you. But if they can't, then
That also could limit the amount of money they're making on it if you don't take it all.
That's right.
It's a line of credit. If you only take half of it, they're only going to get half. the
that's right.
interest.
That's right.
Whereas if they give it you all, then you're paying it back no matter.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Any other questions for Scott? All right, Scott, thank you very
You bet.
much
Thank
for
you
all
for
your
the-
work.
Yep, you bet. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks Ben and Josh, the team as well.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Vital?
Yeah, just one more thing that we've heard from the Historical Society. The Freeze Rebellion Project has been selected as an award winner in the Pageant Film Festival for both Best Realistic Story and Best Production Design. So it's also a finalist in the Best Drama and Best Actor categories. So
I was gonna ask this, and I guess for the board's consideration, would we consider buying tickets to the premiere for staff, you know, as a way of supporting the Historical Society? I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, they're having a premiere. It's like they're treating it like a whole thing. It's about Lower McCungy. You know, I'm just thinking, not that they all want to go, but I just thought it might be a nice thing.
yeah, I mean, we could always do that. And I would say we should remember that we actually funded the project to $25,000 as well. So
Understand.
yeah, I think that's definitely a great idea. If people were interested, why not? As long as the board's okay with it.
Anybody have a problem with that if we opened it up to staff and asked them if they wanted to go? Then why don't you see if they'd like to?
All right.
I'll be there.
We appreciate that.
Okay, is there any old business this evening? Any new business? Under Board of Commissioners reports, the next regular board meeting is August 15th at 6 p.m. The next board workshop is August 20th at 6 p.m. There is no August 26th at 6 p.m. What did I say? 20th? Always been a little bit ahead of time. There is no executive sessions tonight, and with that, we are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Brian. Good night, Mark.
See ya.